What is the pursuit of life? What is your personal truth, and where do you find it? Who are you? What is holding you back? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my daily internal monologue. Well, it's either that or you can't wear that pink blazer, everyone's going to judge you. Or talk in the lowest voice possible, or everyone's going to think you're too feminine. But that's what these are. Voices. Voices that contrast, voices that tell us different things at different times in our life. And I'm here to tell you a story filled with these voices. A journey that I hope can vicariously tell the struggles of many others. A journey that has a lot of high ups and a lot of high lows. Now, throughout this conversation, you're going to hear the words conceal and reveal a lot. Because that's what this journey has been in a nutshell. You see, society tells us that we're going to live our lives in search of a truth, our personal truth. And if we're lucky enough, at some point in our life, we'll find that personal truth. But then again, that's not always the case. Sometimes we have to read between the lines. We have to see what has always been there. So let's start from the beginning. Now, before I start, I want to warn you, I was always one of those kids that you would say was really cute, but you would know was really not cute. So there's no pressure to go, oh. I would say that too. So that's me as a child. And I find the story of my childhood particularly interesting. Not necessarily because of my childhood itself, but also because of what preceded it. Before I was born, my parents had this strong gut feeling that I was going to be a girl. So the nesting process started, and my parents hoarded on pink clothes, makeup, girls' toys, a pink cradle, a pink room. And as you can see, I'm not a girl. But oh no, that didn't stop my parents. We're Indian and we don't throw things out. So I grew up wearing makeup, walking around in dresses, sleeping in pink cradles. That's me on the left-hand side, wearing my mom's makeup, walking down a catwalk thinking I'm a model. And that was my little bubble. And I loved that little bubble because nobody was judging me. I was alone, and this was my world, my pink room. But not soon later, I realized that I was a social outcast. And the first memory I have of being socially outcasted was being in kindergarten. Sitting in a corner, not associating with the boys because they loved action figures and video games, and not being allowed to play with the girls because I was the weird boy that liked Barbie dolls and girly things. I was the weirdo. Magazines like these told me that you're a boy, you should live a boy's life. Why are you living a girl's life? I recently read this article, which is from an extract from a book called Parenting Beyond Pink and Blue, which said that when children see things like these on magazine stores and in toy stores, things that tell them that this is for you, you're a boy, this is for you, you're a girl. Some sources even say they were 70% more likely to buy these things. You see, there we go back to truth. We're trying to find who we are. And when something or someone tells us, this is for you, this defines you, we have a tendency to take it and let it define us. I define myself with different things. And this was the first point in my life where I felt like I had to conceal. Now, though, I look back at it and I see it from a completely different perspective. Okay, so this is what I like to call the evolutionary U-curve. It solves most of the problems we have in the world. And you see this U with a line in the middle, with masculinity on one hand and femininity on the other. Everything in that U are all our personal truths. And the pink and blue that we see are where society tells us to confine those truths. For men, if you're not within the pink space, you're unmasculine. And for women, if you're not within the blue space, you're not feminine. And we all try to fit our truths into that little pink and blue space. We are so many things. We are complex human beings, and yet we fit ourselves within the colors of pink and blue. Now, I'm going to give you a sociology lesson, because this is how that actually looks. Masculinity and femininity are broad, wide, different, but they're also the same. On one hand, we have hegemonic masculinity, which is a type of masculinity that has homophobia, sexism, racism, the type of masculinity that is toxic masculinity. This is not all masculinity, but this is definitely idealized masculinity. On the other hand, we have the same for femininity, where we have normative femininity, which is the typical form of femininity. I like pink, I like walking around in floofy dresses, that kind of femininity. And women who don't express that femininity are unfeminine. And then there are boys like me, and maybe like you, who fall under the kind of masculinity that is subordinate masculinity, which is flawed in its definition itself, which are boys who like traditionally girly things, boys who like wearing floofy dresses and walking around. But this is still categorized under masculinity. Now this is how it should be. If we absolutely rip apart the ideas of men and women, we see how close these words actually are. Masculinity and femininity are fluid. They're not two distinct opposites. What we idealize are the two distinct opposite versions of that fluid. Because the further we are on on that spectrum, the more we can define ourselves, the more personality we have. And none of us, or at least most of us, are not at that level. We do a lot of things that we don't even realize that we say we can't do. I loved the pink Power Ranger, but I always told everyone I love the red Power Ranger, because I needed to be further towards hegemonic masculinity. Now, the first moment where I felt to conceal was 2 years ago. Because you see, everything we've talked about has been implicit. Things I feel, things that are inside my head, things that are possibly inside your head. But gender roles are anything but just implicit. They translate themselves to our explicit lives as well. Aware did a survey that showed that 54% of boys have been yanked, slapped, hit, punched, kicked, and physically abused for being traditionally unmasculine. And 69% of them have been called words like sissy, you're too gay, you're girly. They've questioned their identities just because they're unmasculine. Ladies and gentlemen, these are statistics, and they're far, far away from us. But these statistics were my reality. To give you some context, I went to a traditional Christian all-boys school, where you could see masculinity at its finest. I was told by a teacher to leave the classroom in the beginning of class. Now, there were 1,000 reasons I could think she would tell me to leave the class. I wasn't necessarily the best kid, but the reason she gave me was anything but what I expected. She publicly told me that I need to man up I'm too feminine to be in this boys' class. And then later told me that if I want to survive in Indian society or any society at all, I need to stop being so feminine. You won't survive. I went to the bathroom cubicle and cried for I don't even know how long. I asked myself a lot of really difficult questions. But the hardest thing I had to ask myself was, is revealing or concealing a choice? Or do I have to do it to survive? It was a very hard time, and revealing was the hardest thing I could do. Now we've seen that society did a lot of bad things to me. Society does a lot of bad things to all of us. But we are also society. I find the word gender roles particularly fascinating because it is not only things that society expects from us because of our gender, but there are also roles that we play in our everyday society. Whether that's being a brother, a sister, a friend, a student. We all are parts of other people's society. I want to talk about a role that someone played that was really important to me and shaped my narrative towards the world. I want you to look at that beautiful, gorgeous, strong, powerful woman. That's my mother. You can awe now. She has more degrees than I can count on my fingers. She owns hospitals around the world, and she is the epitome of a successful woman. But if any of us were to go up to her and ask her, what's the hardest thing you've done in your life? She would say, being a mother. Because my childhood was filled with society telling me that your mother is really bad. She never has time for you. My mother was antagonized from me from my childhood. I was repulsed by the idea of not having my mother at PTMs, not having my mother when all the other mothers were there, not having my mother standing in the front row cheering me on. I once had an adult tell me that the problem with your mother is that she loves her patients more than she loves her children. And that struck me really hard. And I reminded her of that every single day. I told her, you are not a good mother. I was her society. I was her entire world. And I constantly reminded her that you are bad. While society cheered my father on, he's also a doctor, and he was being the provider. He was providing for the family. Everyone cheered him on while my mother was told that she was not good enough. And I was part of that. We are all part of that. The problem with society is that we can't look at people beyond their gender. We let people's gender define them. We let people and we tell people every day that you can have countless degrees. You can mortgage everything you have to study, but your primal job is to still be a mother. That's where I was society. Now, we've looked at me being society, you being society, society being bad to us. Now let's make it a lot more macro. And let's look at sociology. Sociology is a lot less boring than it sounds. It's the study of social interaction. And sociology has an entire theory called the gender theory dedicated to gender. Now, the gender theory has a lot of different definitions and a lot of different perspectives, but I find two particularly interesting. The first one is the symbolic interactionism theory, which states that gender isn't necessarily something we are. It's something we do. We do what society tells us our gender is. Boys wear blue clothes, boys wear t-shirts, girls wear dresses. We do our gender. Whereas social constructivism says that anything that we consider is innate, for instance, when people tell us that, oh, women are innately motherly, they're innately housekeepers and men are innately providers. they're all socially constructed. They're all things we have created to make the process of segregation easier, to give us roles and play them on a stage, to let us define ourselves by our gender. Together, what they state is that everything around us, all the fundamentals we live by, are created by us. And they can be changed very easily. Now, I know that sounds crazy and absurd. Our entire lives, we've seen men be a certain way and women be another. Women wear skirts, women wear heels, men love blue. But what if I told you that up until the 20th century, blue was a traditionally feminine color, and pink was a traditionally masculine color? Boys under the age of 7 wore dresses in the 18th and 19th century, and heels were made for men, which is why I'm wearing these heel shoes. But yes, everything that we saw around us was different not a very long time ago. And these definitions will change. And I'm not asking you, make the definition such that I can wear heels and I can wear pink. Let's broaden these definitions beyond their opposites. Let's make them more alike than they have ever been. Let's create a world where I can walk out wearing heels and pink and not be a feminine boy, but just be a boy. Let's create a world where I can walk out wearing makeup, wearing a little pageant dress, and being the most boyish boy I have ever been. So I end the way I started. Who are you? What is holding you back? The answer is all the little things that society has told you to conceal. Thank you.